In the desperate years of the early 1940s, when the map of Europe was stained the dark gray of German occupation, the boundary between ingenuity and madness often blurred within the workshops of British intelligence. Amidst this climate of existential threat, an object emerged that perfectly encapsulated the ruthless creativity of the Special Operations executive. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be nothing more than a piece of industrial debris, perhaps a specialized plumbing tool or a mechanic's torch, consisting of 7 inches of dark, parkerized metal tubing with a strange ball mechanism at one end and a heavy leather strap at the other. However, this innocuous cylinder was, in reality, a condensed arsenal. A triumph of lethal miniaturization designed to offer an Allied agent 3 distinct methods of silent murder in a single package. Inside its steel housing lay a lead-weighted bludgeon capable of shattering a skull, a 24-inch length of piano wire designed to strangle a man in seconds, and a spring-loaded stiletto blade that deployed with the flick of a wrist. It was known as the McLaglen-Pescott close combat weapon, a device so specialized and rare that collector records suggest only 24 were ever manufactured, making it one of the most elusive artifacts of the Second World War's secret front. To understand why such a complex device was deemed necessary, one must look at the geopolitical and tactical reality of 1941. Britain stood isolated against a Nazi war machine. The Wehrmacht had executed a series of lightning conquests that left France, Norway, the Low Countries, Greece, and Yugoslavia under the jackboot. From the frozen fjords of the Arctic Circle to the warm waters of the Mediterranean, the German military had established a fortress Europe protected by hundreds of thousands of sentries. These soldiers guarded the vital arteries of the occupation, the railway junctions, the coastal radar stations, the ammunition dumps, and the bridges. For the newly formed Special Operations Executive, SOE, created in July 1940, with Winston Churchill's fiery mandate to set Europe ablaze, these sentries represented the primary obstacle. The success of a sabotage mission often hinged entirely on the ability to eliminate a single guard without raising an alarm. The problem was that killing a man quietly is significantly more difficult than the movies suggest. A pistol shot, even from a suppressed weapon, creates a mechanical clack and a ballistic crack that carries on the night air. A physical struggle is messy and loud, giving a guard time to shout or fire his rifle, summoning patrols and dooming the mission. The death needed to be instantaneous, silent, and absolute. Existing tools of the trade each solved only a fraction of this grim equation. The Fairbairn-Sykes fighting knife, developed by William Fairbairn and Eric Sykes, based on their brutal experiences with the Shanghai Municipal Police, was the gold standard for lethal stabbing. Its needlepoint blade was designed to slip between ribs and pierce the heart, or sever the carotid artery. However, using a knife required the operative to close the distance to within arm's reach. And if the initial strike missed or hit bone, the agent was suddenly in a hand-to-hand fight with a trained soldier. Alternatively, the Garrote loop of wire, or cord offered a cleaner, quieter kill by cutting off blood flow to the brain, inducing unconsciousness in 10 to 15 seconds. Yet the Garrote was strictly a weapon of surprise. If the target turned around or raised a hand to protect their throat, the agent was left holding a piece of wire against a man armed with a Mauser rifle. The third option was the Cosh or blackjack, a weighted impact weapon used by police forces. A solid strike to the base of the skull caused instant unconsciousness, but the margin for error was high. A glancing blow might only daze the enemy, leaving them capable of crying out, and even a successful strike left a living body that might groan or twitch. So agents often carried all 3 tools: a knife on the belt, a Garrote in the pocket, and a Cosh up the sleeve. But in the adrenaline-fueled chaos of a night operation, fumbling for the correct tool could cost the seconds that meant the difference between life and death. Into this tactical void stepped a man who could not have been more different in background or temperament. John Edward Pescott was the embodiment of British craftsmanship and respectability. As the managing director of Cogswell and Harrison, a prestigious gunmaker, established in 1770 at 108 Piccadilly, Pescott spent his days catering to aristocrats and game hunters. His company was known for building fine shotguns for the grouse moors of Scotland, and he commanded a workforce of master craftsmen capable of precision engineering that few other wartime facilities could match. When the military needed absolute secrecy and exacting tolerances, Pescott was a man they trusted. His partner in this venture, however, was a figure of considerably more dubious provenance. Sidney Temple Leopold McLaglen was a colorful rogue, a self-styled combat expert, and the brother of Victor McLaglen, the Oscar-winning Hollywood actor. While Victor found fame in John Ford westerns, Sidney carved out a niche as a martial arts instructor, styling himself a world jiu-jitsu champion and authoring manuals on uncivilized combat for the Home Guard. Despite accusations of being a liar and an imposter even by his own brother, British intelligence saw value in his brutal theories on close quarters killing, eventually granting him a commission in the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. Together, the gunsmith and the brawler conceived a weapon that would combine the 3 pillars of silent elimination: the cut, the crush, and the strangle. The result was British patent GB 559747A, filed in August 19, which clinically described improvements in or relating to close combat weapons. The patent outlined a combination device that integrated a dagger, a strangulation cord, and a club into a single wrist-mounted unit. The finished product was a marvel of dark engineering. The body of the weapon was a steel tube, chemically blackened to prevent the reflection of moonlight, measuring roughly 7 inches long, the length of a man's hand. It weighed between 500 and 600 grams, a substantial heft that allowed it to be worn on the forearm without causing excessive fatigue, while still providing enough mass to function as a bludgeon. The design intent was to give the operative a hands-free lethality. The weapon was strapped to the wrist, hidden beneath the jacket's sleeve, always ready regardless of what else the agent was carrying. The mechanics of the McLaglen Pescott were intricate, reflecting Pescott's background in fine gun movements. The top of the cylinder was dominated by the Cosh mechanism, a heavy ball of cast lead and steel roughly 1 inch and 3/8 in diameter. This was not a static weight. It was mounted rotatably atop the cylinder. The designers utilized the principle of leverage, using the length of the metal tube as a moment arm to multiply the force generated by the weighted ball. When swung downward against a sentry's temple, the device acted as a devastating. However, the ball served a dual function. It acted as the control knob for the garrote. Inside the hollow body of the weapon, a spool stored 24 inches of high-tensile piano wire. Piano wire was chosen specifically for its rigidity and lack of stretch. Unlike cord, it would not elongate under tension, ensuring that the force applied by the assassin was transferred directly to the victim's throat. One end of the wire was anchored internally, while the free end exited through a small aperture, terminating in a ring grip. To deploy it, the agent would loosen a set screw, pull the wire out to its full length, and then retract it after the deed was done by rotating the weighted ball like a fishing reel. The third component, the dagger, was concealed at the opposite end of the tube. This was not a utility blade, but a pure killing instrument, a 5.5-inch stiletto, thin and spike-shaped, optimized for deep penetration rather than cutting. The deployment mechanism borrowed from the gravity knives used by paratroopers, but refined for stealth. A spring-loaded button on the side of the tube controlled a locking arm. When the button was depressed, gravity took over. The operative simply had to point their arm downward and shake their wrist. The blade would slide out of the housing and lock into place with a reassuring click. This gravity-fed system was a crucial design choice, ensuring that the blade would deploy reliably even if the operator's hands were wet with rain or blood, or if they were operating in total darkness, where fine motor skills degrade. The entire assembly was secured to the arm via a heavy web strap, allowing it to sit flush against the forearm, invisible to a casual glance but instantly accessible. Despite the lethal ingenuity of the design, the path from prototype to production was fraught with technical challenges. An early prototype, which surfaced in a 2022 auction with provenance linking it to the Wilkinson Sword toolroom, highlighted severe design flaws. The original ball weight was too light to serve as an effective Cosh. Without sufficient mass, the user had to swing the weapon faster and in a wider arc, increasing the chance of being seen. Furthermore, the original blade was a mere 3 inches long, insufficient to reach vital organs reliably through heavy military greatcoats and webbing. The most critical failure, however, was in the garrote mechanism. The internal spool was too small, forcing the stiff piano wire to wind too tightly. This caused the wire to kink and deform, creating weak points that could snap under the extreme tension of strangulation, a catastrophic failure that would leave an agent helpless. Pescott's craftsmen addressed these issues in the final production version, enlarging the ball for greater impact, extending the blade to a combat-effective length, and redesigning the spool to reduce stress on the wire. However, even with these mechanical refinements, the McLaglen Pescott faced hurdles that no amount of engineering could overcome. The weapon arrived too late and was perhaps too clever for its own good. By the time the patent was published in 1944, the SO and their American counterparts in the OSS had already standardized their equipment. Operatives had trained for years with the Fairburn Sykes knife, a weapon that had been produced in the millions and had already achieved legendary status. They had learned to trust simple, dedicated tools like the standard wire garrote and the silent well-rod pistol. Introducing a complex, unfamiliar, multifunction device in the middle of the war offered dubious benefits. There is also the axiom of military equipment that jack of all trades is master of none. By combining 3 weapons, the McLaglen Pescott made compromises on all of them. The Cosh was lighter than a dedicated blackjack, the stiletto was thinner and more fragile than a fighting knife, and the garrote lacked the handles and leverage of a dedicated strangulation cord. Furthermore, the device itself was damning evidence. A fighting knife might be explained away as a soldier's utility tool, but a wrist-mounted, spring-loaded triple weapon was undeniably an assassin's device. Capture with such an object would almost certainly lead to torture and execution by the Gestapo. Consequently, the operational history of the McLaglen Pescott is defined by its silence, not the silence of the kill, but the silence of the archives. Despite being intended for the SOE and potentially the U.S. 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade, There is no confirmed documentation of the weapon being used in combat, no mission logs record its deployment, no after-action reports credit it with a kill, and no veteran memoirs describe its use in the field. It appears to have remained a souvenir rather than a service item, a curiosity purchased by operatives or issued in small numbers but left behind in favor of more trusted tools. Of the approximately 24 units believed to have been manufactured, most vanished into the fog of post-war chaos. The few that survive today are prized by collectors, fetching thousands of dollars at auction as rare symbols of the clandestine war. They reside in museums like the Secret Army exhibition at WWII and the Imperial War Museum, silent witnesses to a specific moment in history. The McLaglen Pescot remains a fascinating footnote in the history of warfare, a road not taken in the evolution of covert weaponry. It stands in stark contrast to the success stories of British special weapons development, such as the Welrod pistol, which saw active service from Norway to Burma. Yet, the existence of the McLaglen Pescot reveals something profound about the mindset of Britain during its darkest hour. It demonstrates a willingness to try absolutely anything, to innovate without restraint, and to empower engineers to explore every conceivable method of destroying the enemy. It is a physical manifestation of creative desperation. While it may never have taken a life, the 7 inches of dark metal, with its hidden wire and sliding blade, serves as an enduring testament to the lengths to which a nation will go when its survival hangs by a thread. It was a tool designed for a war without rules, built by men who understood that in the fight against tyranny, the only thing that mattered was the result.